when we talk about entrepreneurial mindsets, of course, for us, the basic question was, what is it about? And we decided that the main aspect is the entrepreneurs themselves, so the people behind the ideas to start a business. Therefore, for the preparation of our interview, of course, it was very important to us that all students knew the purpose of the interviews. So what is it that we want to achieve? What are our personal goals, so to speak? And therefore, of course, we had an introduction to the idea of entrepreneurial mindsets and the idea of how to start a business. We talked about how we kind of do the interview. In our case, we had the chance to meet a company in person and talk to them in person. And for the second business, we had an online meeting, like just ours today. So two different versions. And of course, there was a little difference on how to ask questions and get the answers that we were looking for. The indicated time was also an aspect, because as you can imagine, if it's an online interview, it is not very smart to have it longer than 30 minutes because it's just a little more exhausting, as we all know. And so the focus here was to ask questions that were just based on the experience of our entrepreneur. And for the second interview, we had the chance to ask further questions because we were face to face with the business, and that made it a little easier. For the types of interviews that we prepared, of course, it was not an informal interview but more formal, because we're talking to business partners, entrepreneurs, and therefore, of course, we were very interested in their whole idea behind it. What we did was we followed the general interview guide approaches. So we focused on different interview questions, some with open questions, some with closed questions, to make sure that we either get a fixed response we hope for, or of course, for the beginning of the interview, had very open-ended questions, so giving the business a chance to tell us everything they know. So here that was very important for us, that we have like the general rules, how an interview is supposed to be. Therefore, we talked about the possible different types of topics all the students could pick. And therefore, before we started to talk an entrepreneurial mindset, we kind of talked about possible different behaviors if you enter a market or a business, different opinions and values. So what makes you an entrepreneur, maybe compared to other people who do not open a business, who work in a company for all their lives? So how are they different? What different values do they share? Of course, we were very interested in personal feelings, so personal experiences we could gather from our interview partners. And as we all know, we're here in school to make sure that you all become people who are able to open a company or to be the boss of someone. Therefore, their perspective of knowledge, what do they think, which knowledges do you need, do you have to study, you have to be interested in, that was kind of very interesting for us as well. Another topic the students could pick from was asking the interviews about their background, so their experiences, maybe former workplaces and stuff like that. And of course, a very important aspect always, if you want to start a business, which kind of strategies did they use? So was there maybe as well a guideline they followed, or other businesses they could ask? So here we were just looking for topics before we started out. And of course, in the end, you will see we kind of checked all the questions for our interview, because what's very important is that you always talk about the wording, right? You don't want to offend anyone if they're kind enough to do an interview with you. And on the other hand side, they should get kind of the feeling that you know what you're talking about, so they see you as an equal partner and give you maybe details they wouldn't share with everyone else. So that was like kind of the first thing we talked about, the general idea of an interview before we even started to create interview questions. Because it's a very, very wide topic to talk about entrepreneurial mindsets. Here in Germany, we discussed that it's maybe a smart thing to talk to all students. What do you think is entrepreneurial mindset? Because otherwise it might be tricky to ask questions, because for the type of questions, knowledge is very important, but to ask smart questions to a business partner, you too do need a lot of knowledge to ask questions. All right, to give you a little recap about what we talked about. So we kind of set the topping, and what we did is we talked about very successful businesses, very successful entrepreneurs during our time. So starting with Marco Polo, going on to Steve Jobs, because I'm pretty sure you all know Apple and their very successful business history. And right now we're doing a video conference, and of course without Bill Gates possibly that would not be possible. So he was another person we looked at to find out what exactly is the idea of entrepreneurial mindsets. So highly successful people, that was our focus, because as I said in the beginning, if you do have a business idea, if you want to start a company, the most important aspect is that you believe in your idea, and that it is not just an idea, but that you kind of do everything you can as a person to make your idea happen. So what we looked at was, as I said, highly successful people who already dealt with this topic of starting a business. We don't have to do it again, but just for the idea, the people we looked at, hopefully some are familiar to you, right? Maybe you ever flew with the Virgin Airlines, for example, or you ever watched Shark Tank and see people decide which company has to get investments. And of course, again, Steve Jobs, right? To make sure students were able to find fitting interview questions, we dealt with the topic, what characteristics does a person need to start a company, and possibly to find out who they are, so the people we were dealing with. So what we found out is that often you're talking to very creative people who are very open-minded, who don't see boundaries, who are always taking action. So for them, it's not a problem to have a week of 24/7, maybe 24/7, 365 days a year working for your company, because they want to be leaders. They want to make sure they develop their idea. Maybe they can get lots of people who believe in their ideas. And of course, what's most important is people who know their markets. So we're very interested in several or a variety of different topics. And of course, we know that for today, one of the most important topic is that you use your resources very smartly, because we know that our resources will end one day. And maybe today it's more important than ever to talk about using your resources smartly. So that was another topic where students knew that's something they could ask about. So how do entrepreneurs know how to use resources smartly? And if you want to start your own business, of course, you have to be a person who's willing to take risks. So another area for our questions is like, how do you manage to live with these kind of risks? Why are you willing to live with risks, right? So why do you want to be an entrepreneur and not just work for someone else with a very fixed salary, and you know that at 5 o'clock your work day is over and you can enjoy your free time? So how are these people different in managing their risks? And last but not least, of course, a very important aspect, and an aspect we wanted to figure out, is how are they able to create the networks that they need? They definitely need, because if you do not have a network, it's very tricky to start your own business, and it's very likely to fail. So the last kind of topic to create questions for was kind of ask, how do they use social media? How did social media kind of change the way businesses are running? Where do they get to know partners, possible people who want to invest into their idea? Where do they meet, and where can they talk somehow? So just to put it in one picture, if you want to open your business, ask our interview partners, are they just dreamers, or how do they believe in their ideas and come up with their business idea? So we talked about Walt Disney. We don't have to do it again, but afterwards we looked at different businesses to see how their story of success was, and kind of, yes, to sum it up, to give you the idea, we just found out that each and every company and each and every leader of a company at one time in their life, they failed, right? So there is not one entrepreneur who has not failed once with their idea. So here again, taking the risks, that were an important aspect. So here you see the last picture. So for example, Richard Branson, before he made sure that his Virgin Airlines was very successful, and now he's the man who wants to fly to the moon, right? He had 3 failing companies before he was successful. Or Mark Zuckerberg, right? Lots of ideas, but before, how he called it, the Facebook started to be successful, he had to learn lots of lessons, that not just because you have one good idea that will work and you will be successful and your company is just running very smoothly. So you have to be a certain type of person to be able to deal with this kind of risk, to make sure you get out even stronger if your company was failing. And it's a kind of a process where you learn lots of things that you can take and use for your next business ideas. So this process of failing, we discussed, was something we were very interested in, and therefore possibly an important aspect to ask questions to our business partners, how they deal with this stress and stress factor or risk factor in their lives. What we figured out is that everything was connected to the entrepreneur himself or herself, because when you start a business, you are the one who has to make sure it's working, to make it possible. You have to believe in it. So what we tried was kind of find questions that were fitting to the businesses we were meeting, and try to find out what makes them special somehow. So why are they entrepreneurs? How did we do it? For us, it was very easy, because we had the chance to not just create interview questions within school, so within our schoolrooms, but we had the chance to go to Nibel and to visit the Center of Innovation of Northern Frisia, and there, yes, it is a creative space somehow where people can meet and can make sure they have a space to come up with their business plans, with their business ideas, to talk to people out of the field who have lots of knowledge about starting a business. And we were part of it. So we got the chance to have a space where we could come up with questions. So what we mainly did was very easy. We made sure we had groups of students who were working together, talking about everything they found out so far about entrepreneurial mindsets. And their task was very easy. They just had to create as many questions as possible within the first step. So whatever came up to mind, they had to write it down and then just collect questions. So that for the second step, we had the chance to listen to all the questions, and they were able to ask them to the experts in the Center of Innovation. So we had kind of a test run to make sure which kind of questions are appropriate. Because what we did is we tried to make sure that we had kind of a ranking for our questions to put them into a special order somehow. So here again, we had a look kind of for what is a general guideline for preparing an interview. So we focused mainly here on our topics. So we kind of try to find questions asking for the entrepreneur's behavior, their feelings, their backgrounds, opinions, values, knowledge, and strategies. And what we came up with is kind of a variety of questions we were able to ask. For example, first find out what makes the entrepreneur different to other employees. So here the first question is, why did you decide to leave your former employee and your comfortable 8-to-5 job, right? So how did you come up with the idea to be independent, to work on your own, to be your own boss? That for us seemed very interesting because it gave us the chance somehow to get an idea who's the person we are dealing with. So who are they and what makes them different? It was kind of like a little icebreaker question to see their answer and how willing they were to talk to us, how many details they wanted to give to us. And they both responded very friendly and were excited to tell us about their idea. So when they decided to do something else, to be different to people working from 8-to-5, and why they think there was the right choice for them. Of course, for us, very interesting, because that's what we all have to figure out, is if you want to be independent, if you want to start your own business, how do you do it, right? So of course, possibly some of you already woke up one day and said, oh, I have a great idea. Possibly I can start my own business, but then the idea is not everything. So somehow asking for help for people who already started their business. So what are the most important steps we can take next, right? What we know is, we just heard it today, possibly that it's very different from country to country, which regulations we have to fulfill, what we have to remember. But what we found out during our interview and while being in the Center of Innovation is that it also differs from branch to branch. So it was interesting to see that people dealing with social media aspects had to consider different steps than someone starting, yes, their business working with lots of customers, for example. Also, we try to find questions somehow to see how did they make sure that other people knew about their business idea? How did they start to get a network? And here, for example, right, how to draw the attention to their business. It was very interesting to see, and maybe you have the chance to ask something similar within your countries and for your business partners, because what we figured out is that they all agreed that really network is the most important aspect, that without a network, you have no chance of survival on the markets. If you want your idea to live somehow, you need people who support you. Then we try to have some questions about, yes, their feelings about it, their behaviors, as we talked about. So, for example, we talked to Johanna, and what was kind of special to us already was that she's a woman starting a business, and that's not very common, still not very common, even we live in 2022. And therefore, we asked, for example, for her feelings about what makes it special for her as a woman to start a business. And what we found out is that this open question somehow about feelings made sure that she was giving lots of answers. So she was talking for quite some time, and that made sure for us that we got lots of results and information. Of course, what we all know is that then we had lots of questions about how do you make sure somehow that your business will survive within the first year. So we had some questions that I would kind of put to the knowledge aspect. So how do you get funding? Where do you get real business partners? Which questions do you have to ask? I don't have to read them all out loud because, of course, we can send them to you. But just that you get the idea, we try to find questions for each and every field. Not just about the person itself, about their feelings, about their knowledge, about their specialties, and so on. Afterwards, after collecting all these questions and having kind of like a test run, we had the chance to kind of prepare our questions even further on the next day when we went back to school and not in Nibel. And here, again, we had kind of teams of experts, of students who then picked questions and tried to put them into different categories, and yes, just made sure that what we think was very important, made sure they felt comfortable asking those questions, because it was not just about the questions themselves, but about being able to know what you're asking and somehow to know which answers do you want to hear, right? So our advice somehow to you, if you have to do interview questions again, is sometimes it's very smart to start the other way around. So to ask yourself, which answers are you looking for? So what do you want to find out? What do you want to know? And then create questions fitting for that, and making sure that people who ask those questions are really interested in the answers. So that if you have an open interview, you're able to ask further questions, for example. All right, so that was kind of our way of finding interview questions. So to sum it up, the most important aspect is first figure out what is entrepreneurial mindset to you, so that you have a common knowledge about the topic. Afterwards, make sure make sure that you know how you want to do the interview. Is it like face-to-face or online. Make sure that you kind of have your own schedule. So how many questions do you want to ask? How long should it be? And very important, try to find out something about the businesses before, so that you can decide, should it be more formal or informal if you talk to them. You will see that there are lots of general interview guides that you can get online that might help you. And our advice to us, or our advice to you is, you should start with very open questions to make sure your interview partner talks a lot in the beginning, and in the end you have some closed questions. Our topics, as you can see again, were kind of about the entrepreneur himself or herself, and on the other hand side about their business. So that's kind of what we did.